Okay, so what if you could actually calculate the exact date of a major biblical prophecy? Today, we're diving into a source that claims to do just that. And look, it makes one of the boldest claims you can imagine, pinpointing a 7-year timeline right down to the very day. It's this wild mix of ancient texts and modern tech, so let's see how they did it.
You know, for centuries, the common wisdom has always been, no one can know the day or the hour. But the source we're looking at today, it just throws that idea right out the window. It argues that not only can the timeline be calculated, but that the numbers have been sitting there right in the open all along.
And there it is, the big one. The source we're examining puts a flag in the ground and says the 7-year period we know as the tribulation is going to begin on September 22nd, 2025. I mean, that is incredibly specific. So the million-dollar question is, how? How on earth do you land on that exact date?
All right, so to really get this calculation, we have to start with the blueprint the source is using. And it all goes back to a concept from the book of Daniel, something called the 70th week.
So what is Daniel's 70th week?
Well, in a nutshell, it's this final 7-year period prophesied in the Bible. And according to this interpretation, this is the grand finale, the time frame that wraps up the current age and brings in what the text calls everlasting righteousness. This specific 7-year block is the master key to their whole calculation. And right here in this verse from Daniel, we get our first huge clue. It says something really important happens in the middle of the 7. Now, that's a massive hint, right? It tells us this isn't just one long 7-year stretch. It's clearly, explicitly split into 2 halves.
And the source, it attaches very specific events, and more importantly, very specific day counts to each of those halves. The first half is said to be 1,260 days long, and the second is 1,290 days. So the next logical question has to be, where in the world do these members come from?
And this is where we get into what you might call the prophetic math. The source argues it's not inventing anything here, it's just pulling specific day counts found directly in the scriptures and, putting the pieces together. The first number comes straight out of the book of Revelation. The text says these 2 witnesses will show up and prophesy for a period of exactly 1,260 days. The source connects this directly to the length of that first half of the tribulation.
So, there's our first key number, 1,260 days. Got it. Now, what about the second half?
For that piece of the puzzle, the source takes us back to Daniel, and it states that from a very specific moment, when the daily sacrifice is abolished, there will be 1,290 days. And boom, there's our second number, 1,290. And you'll notice it's 30 days longer than the first half. The argument here is that these aren't just random numbers, but they're actually precise interlocking measurements for this prophetic clock. So this is the big moment. You take the 2 time periods, both pulled from Scripture, the 1,260 days and the 1,290 days, and you just add them up. And what do you get? A grand total of 2,550 days. The source claims this is it, the exact biblically defined length of the entire 7-year tribulation. So now we have this very, very specific number, 2,550 days. And this is where the source says it had its big aha moment. The author took this number and started scanning our modern calendar, specifically looking for a 7-year period between 2 major Jewish holidays that was exactly 2,550 days long. And this is what it supposedly found. A 7-year window, starting on the Feast of Trumpets in 2025 and ending on the Day of Atonement in 2032, that spans, you guessed it, precisely 2,550 days. According to the source, the biblical day count and the modern calendar dates just click together perfectly.
But, okay, how rare is this really? I mean, maybe this kind of alignment happens all the time, right? Well, to find out, the source did something very 21st century. It turned to artificial intelligence. It literally asked ChatGPT to crunch the numbers and search through calendar data. And the AI's answer was pretty interesting. It found that if you go all the way back to 1800, this exact 2,550-day alignment between these 2 feasts only happened a handful of times. And looking forward to the year 2050, it only happens twice, in 2025 and then again in 2026. So yeah, it's a rare event for sure, but not totally one of a kind. So let's just follow the source's logic for a minute. If this 2,550-day period starting in 2025 is the one, then what does it actually claim is going to happen? Because the numbers are one thing, but they're attached to a very specific story. So the way the source lays it out, the story happens in 5 major acts. First, a 7-year covenant gets confirmed with Israel, which then allows for Jewish temple worship to be restored. But then right at the midpoint, that covenant gets broken. This betrayal is what leads to the abomination of desolation being set up in the temple. And that event kicks off stage 4, the Great Tribulation with the Antichrist in power. The whole story then builds to its climax, the 5th and final stage, the return of Christ, to put an end to that reign.
And this whole prophetic drama really centers on these key players. You've got the Antichrist, who is the main antagonist. You have the 2 witnesses, who the source speculates might be figures like Moses and Elijah, prophesying during that first half. And the entire story really plays out as a conflict involving the nation of Israel and the surrounding Gentile nation. And that brings us to the end of this incredible puzzle. The source presents a really fascinating case, built on linking these biblical day counts to our own modern calendar. So it leaves us with this final, pretty provocative question. What does it mean when ancient numbers and future prophecies seem to align so precisely on the calendar we use today? That's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.